Today I bring you another full story from one of the Avatar The Last Airbender comics, and this one features Uncle Iroh and June the Hunter. This happens after the events of the main series and kind of fits right alongside some of the other stories that we're telling right now in YouTube Shorts. So sit back, this is the full story from start to finish. I found this one pretty enjoyable, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I really liked how it addressed Iroh's backstory and some of his past, and you know, even though we find him to be kind of a happy-go-lucky uncle, right? He still does have quite a bit of a dark past. And of course, it's also good to see June the Hunter back, literally for any reason, because that's a baddie right there. So enjoy the story. And yeah, day to day, we cover new chapters of, you know, various different things. Right now, it's Avatar. Next season, it'll be something else. So stick on the channel, subscribe if you enjoy this video, and check the channel for more. There's probably more where that came from, right? Let's get into it. Have you ever wondered what happened to Uncle Iroh after the end of Avatar The Last Airbender? Well, we have the answer, as in Iroh's own comic, we pick up in the Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop that he runs in Ba Sing Se in the middle of his retirement. As Iroh's assistant Feng tells the customers that this is the best tea shop in the world, but Iroh wants his customers to give him their opinion, as he hands them both a glass of Jasmine Green Tea, with them both saying that it smells wonderful, especially since they're tired from traveling all day. That's where, taking a sip, the two boys say that the tea is amazing, and Iroh's reputation is really well deserved, but more than the tea, they actually came here to meet the man that helped Avatar Aang save the world and end the 100-Year War, with Iroh saying he only had a small role to play in that entire situation, as now he just lives as a humble tea brewer. But the boys press Iroh, asking him to share some old war stories then, at the very least, to go with their drinks, but this time Iroh humbly refuses, as suddenly the smile gets wiped right off of his face when he hears a man outside yelling "Fire Nation out," and we see something interesting. You see, outside we have protesters holding up signs that have Iroh's face crossed out on them, saying that the Dragon of the West has no business in their city. He's a war criminal who tried to destroy Ba Sing Se before he ever saved it, and now he's just living here like it's his home or something. But that's where Iroh steps in, responding to the man directly, apologizing for what he did in his youth, and saying that he's grateful that the city has been welcoming to him despite that, as he offers the protesters some mint tea to try and get him to calm down, but the man slaps the tea out of Iroh's hands, saying that he'd never drink this pathetic Fire Nation swill, as the cup falls to the ground, and immediately Iroh's patrons from the store come out, telling the man off. They say, "Hey buddy, in case you haven't noticed, the 100-Year War is over. Iroh's made amends and he makes the best tea in the world, so get out of here and take your negativity elsewhere," with Iroh telling his friends to calm down because they can all peacefully talk through this, as the man leaves, realizing that he's outnumbered. But that's where we can see a mysterious hooded figure looking on from the background. Now, as this day goes on, eventually it's time to close up shop, as Feng tells Iroh that they're running low on all of their blends because deliveries have become quite irregular for some reason lately, with Iroh telling her that he'll look into it, as he lets her go home and locks up the shop for the night. But that's when suddenly, from the shadows, he's met by a strange woman who throws a strange dart at Iroh, which he thankfully deflects using his firebending, as Iroh says that this really isn't a day for him to make new friends. But that's where we see the identity of the person responsible for this attack, as it's actually June the Huntress, who we originally saw going up against Team Avatar in the TV show, as she apologizes to Iroh and tells him that there's a bounty on his head that she unfortunately needs to collect, with this story starting off strong. But how is Iroh gonna handle this? Iroh tells June that he's happy to see her and notices that she's looking great these days, with June telling him that he shouldn't be because she's about to get the biggest payday she's ever seen by bringing him in. However, Iroh doesn't agree. He says, "Sorry June, I don't plan on being abducted today," as June puffs a handful of dust right into his face, which Iroh unfortunately breathes in, knocking him out, as June ties him up and places her on Nyla, her loyal mount, heading through the hills with Iroh in custody. Eventually though, Iroh wakes up, telling June that he at least deserves to know the name of the person who put a bounty on him in the first place, but when June denies him, she tells him to just be quiet and not ask her any questions, like where they're going or who they're going to meet, as Iroh goes along with this for a while, but eventually he's had enough of this farce, remembering just who he is. So right at that moment, Iroh decides to start singing as loudly as he possibly can, causing Nyla to look back at June and Iroh confused, as June tells Iroh, "Fine, I'll answer one question if you promise to stop singing from here on out, with Iroh finally stopping to ask her where they're going, with June telling him that they're going to Daxia Harbor, which is a former Fire Nation colony that also serves as a hub for bounty hunters and those who seek to place bounties on others. That's when Iroh asks a second question, once again asking who in Daxia would place a bounty on his head, but June still won't answer, causing Iroh to wonder if it was the guy from earlier today or maybe someone from further back in his past, as Iroh says that whoever they are, he's prepared to face them to try and ease their soul. However, while on that topic, he apologizes to June for how he treated her back when Zuko hired her to hunt down the Avatar, telling June that she doesn't have to forgive him, but he at least wanted her to hear his apology, and she tells him that she'll think about forgiving him and looks down making a sad face, but that's when Nyla has picked up a scent. And it's Earth Kingdom, guys? The men walk up saying that they're happy to see June here, as she explains to Iroh that they're ex-friends of hers named the Viper Bats, who eventually stopped being bounty hunters because they realized they could just turn bounty hunters into the Earth Kingdom for more money, making them complete traitors in her eyes. As everyone talks for a bit here, but it becomes obvious that words aren't going to do anything, so as June stands up to get these guys out of her way, she tells Nyla to stay with Iroh the prisoner while she takes care of this, and this battle begins. As June uses her whip to knock one of the men off of his feet by dragging his staff, as she knocks him into another guy while trying to steal the blade of a third man standing there, not believing how quick she is, but that's where she starts to face a little trouble, as a fourth man with no hair knocks into her with a tackle expecting June to fall to the ground, but she doesn't, allowing her to smack Baldy in the back of the head with the hard end of her whip, as everyone else tries to jump her with her narrowly dodging their weapons before getting grabbed by one of the men, where things start to look dicey. But thankfully for June, Iroh is able to convince her pet Nyla that it's time to lend her some help, as Nyla comes rushing in, knocking one of the men out of the way to protect his mama, but one of the men pulls out his dagger saying that it's time to make lunch meat. As June screams no, we see Iroh pulling the oldest trick in his book, as he's able to breathe fire among the group, causing a small inferno that makes all of them run away because they just aren't getting paid enough for this, allowing June to get back on her mount and thank Iroh for the help. However, she says that despite his help, she can't just let him go, as he's still an extremely valuable bounty, warning Iroh that she'll absolutely knock him out if she thinks that she's in any danger of being hit with his fire breath. But Iroh comforts her, telling June that he's along for the ride completely willingly, that is, as long as she tells him who hired her in the first place. It's there where, finally coming clean, June tells Iroh that she was hired by the leader of the Wu Yi Tea cartel, who operates out of Daxia Harbor, telling Iroh that they're a group that controls most of the tea trade in the Earth Kingdom and beyond, saying that whether he realized it or not, most of his tea probably comes from them. As Iroh sees this as a chance to finally meet his supplier face to face to talk about the issues they've been having with deliveries, so he tells June that he promises that he won't run off on her and doesn't need those shackles anymore, allowing June to set him free, as we officially have a journey in front of us, so let's begin. The journey to Daxia Harbor is long, as eventually Iroh asks June the Hunter if things have really gotten so bad that bounty hunters have to make a living by turning in other bounty hunters, as June says only for cowards like the Viper Bats, but things have changed quite a bit since the days of the 100-Year War, where bounties were plentiful. Nowadays, Earth King Kuei's new laws and reforms put pressure on the sort of people that used to hire bounty hunters, making the world a lot more civilized, but a lot less fun. It's there where we actually see that June is really principled, as she tells Iroh that she'd never turn the Viper Bats in like they were trying to do to her, because even if it's good money, she can't bring herself to turn on her fellow hunters for the Earth Kingdom military. And that's where Iroh asks her if she'd consider just retiring and living a quiet life somewhere, with June saying that's not really the life for her. Seeing the same people every day in some town? She grew up hunting bounties all over the world with her father traveling, so at the very least, she wants to see the rest of the world. This makes Iroh laugh. He says, well, that's great. What an exciting childhood you must have had. But June's face tells a different story. We see in a flashback that at dinner she asked her dad to tell her her favorite story, as her mom begins to tell the story of how once there was a beautiful thief that stole from the rich and gave it back to the poor, that was eventually captured by some Earth Kingdom soldiers who set a trap for her, causing her to rot away in prison for the rest of her life. Or that's what would have happened if a brave soldier who actually agreed with what she stood for didn't free her from her chains and end up happily with her as the years went on, clearly being the story of how Jun's parents met. The issue is that as his family is enjoying their dinner, the past finally catches up with them, as a bunch of Earth Kingdom guards get ready to raid the house, with Jun's father saying it looks like they brought the whole army to catch these two, as Jun's mom tells him to escape through the rooftops with their daughter as she distracts them, because they'll do him worse than they'll do her since he betrayed the army and she's just a petty thief, with Jun's mother telling her husband to make sure that Jun grows up to be free as the two of them escape. But we don't know what happened to Jun's mother, and on the long road to Daxia Harbor, who knows what else we'll learn as these two get to know each other better and better. As Jun tells him that her father raised her up with solid principles, like swearing to never do a job for the government and owing an allegiance to no one but themselves, meaning home was just another word for where they were at the time, because there was never a time that they were stuck in one place. Iroh responds here telling Jun that putting down roots can make someone's life feel routine, but it also brings out the opportunity for developing relationships and gives you a place to make lasting friendships and come together with your family, so Jun shouldn't be so scared of finally giving up this life, as Jun tells him no thanks, saying that Nyla is the only family that she needs. Now from here, days and days go by with these two getting to know each other and really bonding, as I'm sure anyone would, spending some time with Iroh, as they cross through forest and rocky terrain, but eventually they make it to Daxia Harbor, a beautiful town right on the water featuring a stable outside the city where Jun is able to park Nyla, her pet Shirshu, as her and Iroh walk into town, and Iroh takes note of how interesting it is that things always change, but parts of them stay the same also, noting how everything looks more civilized here in Daxia, but looking at the people, he can tell that it's still as dangerous as ever. And there, Jun tells him not to worry because everyone here is an honest, hard-working criminal, as Iroh spots a stand selling tea and rushes there, leaving Jun behind. Once she finally catches up, she reminds him that it's rude to touch people's merchandise before buying it, as Iroh begs her to at least let him buy one box of tea while they're here, but Jun tells him it's out of the question, reminding Iroh that he's her bounty and they're not just here on vacation, as suddenly Jun is interrupted by someone calling her name. At that moment, Jun turns around seeing a husky earthbender named Feng, who says that this is actually her stand that she runs to sell the harvest from her farm, with Jun being confused that she even has a farm, considering Feng is a bounty hunter. But Feng tells Jun that she actually runs the farm with the rest of her bounty hunting team, introducing them all to Jun as they're kinda a perfect example that you don't have to do this alone, with Jun congratulating them but still being a little confused, as Feng gives her a bunch of things from the farm and even gives Iroh a set of their best tea, telling them to come and visit the farm whenever they've got time. And there, as Iroh and Jun are about to walk away, suddenly they see some thugs going from business to business bothering people because they're members of Wu Yi, a group that demands protection money from people and also runs the local tea trade. This is where Iroh remembers that these are actually the people that he's here to see, saying that this goes beyond regular criminal stuff and is really more like societal leeching, as Iroh and Jun get out of there with him complimenting her friends and telling Jun that this trip has reminded him just how much his life has changed over the years, because when he was a young Fire Nation general, all he wanted was glory for his country and he'd do anything to get that. But now he sees his own value as just a humble tea shop owner who brings joy to his customers with how delicious his tea is, and he takes pride in integrating into the culture and community of Ba Sing Se, with him even revealing that lately he's been seeing this lovely lady in town, which he never would have thought possible all these years since he lost his first wife, showing just how ready Iroh is to live out his last few years in happiness where he feels loved most. But Jun just kind of hears all of this and doesn't respond, as they reach the Wu Yi's headquarters and she tells him to prepare himself because these are dangerous people. There, walking in, Iroh says he really wants to peek into their warehouse and see what sort of rare blends they have, but Jun tells him that the leader of this company actually does seem to have some massive grudge against Iroh, warning him again to be very careful, as she reminds herself that she is in this for the money at the end of the day, so she can't mess this up. As they walk in, a guard lets them into a room with a tall man holding a jar of tea, as he wears Fire Nation robes and looks to be middle-aged with dark gray hair all over his head, as the man welcomes Jun, telling her it's good to see her again, with Iroh immediately knowing who this man is, as the man thanks his general for remembering him, revealing himself to be Kung, a member of Iroh's army back in the day when the Dragon of the West was raging for the Fire Lord. So now, as Iroh tells Kung that he thought he was dead and the man smiles, saying that he guesses a ghost is the one who hired Jun, things are going to get really interesting because it's time to get into Iroh's past, as the consequences
begin to catch up to him.
As Kung tells Iroh that he's heard all about Iroh's new life in Ba Sing Se, where he pretends to be a humble tea shop owner, laughing about whether or not any of his customers realize just who the guy smiling in front of their tea is, as Iroh's smile completely vanishes. He tells Kung that he tries his best to hide his past, however nowadays more so than anything he's trying to live an honorable existence after the end of the 100-Year War, with Kung saying, "Oh, how nice for you. Would you like a tour?" From there, the man takes Iroh around a bit, showing him their tea processing room, where he says that all sorts of blends are sorted here, as he lets Iroh even try a new sample that he calls Dragon Tears, telling Iroh to drink it up since tea was all Iroh talked about when he was helping the Fire Nation lay waste to the Earth Kingdom. However, as Iroh says that the tea is good, especially because it has a little bit of a spicy kick to it, Iroh gets down to brass tacks, saying that he doesn't think being a tea drinking buddy is the reason that Kung hired June to bring him all this way. So what's actually going on here? There, Kung tells him that his role in the Fire Nation army prepared him for what it takes to run the Wu Yi tea cartel, because in Daxia Harbor, his group uses their suppliers to maintain the guise that they're actually a legitimate business, which is something that he learned from Iroh back during the war, because of course, Iroh would have his men infiltrate countries by pretending to be merchants or travelers, blending into Earth Kingdom society before they eventually sprung up to attack and burn those cities down. It's crazy how he was moving, but when Iroh asks how Kung's fellow soldiers are doing these days, Kung says they're all dead. Iroh apologizes, saying, "I'm sorry to hear that," but that's where Kung starts to show off some of his anger. He says, "Are you? My brothers and I did what was needed for the Fire Nation to win the war. We snuck in the cities and destroyed key targets, and the outer wall of the city fell. Everything was perfect. But then you walked away instead of conquering the city, leaving all of your soldiers behind enemy lines. We would have done anything for you. You were the greatest general who had ever lived, and you abandoned us in the heart of danger." This is tense, because I completely understand why Kung is mad, given that despite the fact what they were doing was wrong and they shouldn't have been invading the Earth Kingdom, anyone would be mad if their leader literally just decided to walk in the middle of a group effort and left everybody stranded to deal with the consequences themselves. And now that we know that Kung was ultimately the only survivor left after Iroh did this, it really makes sense why he would put the bounty on Iroh. But what now? Iroh responds, telling Kung that things aren't as simple as he says, because back when they breached the walls of Ba Sing Se, the Earth Kingdom didn't let up even a little bit. They were prepared to defend their city to the death, and victory was anything but assured for the Fire Nation. But honestly, Iroh says the main reason he abandoned the war was, of course, because his son died. Iroh says when Lu Ten died, he lost the will to continue fighting his father's bloody war, because he finally realized that the feeling he felt was something he caused thousands of others to feel as the war machine grinded their families into dust. This is where Iroh tells Kung that he actually did try to send a message to Kung's unit telling them to retreat, but it never reached them, with Iroh taking responsibility for that and summing everything up by saying that not even victory over the Earth Kingdom could bring Lu Ten back to him, so it made the entire war feel pointless. But this is where Kung finally breaks his silence. He says, "What about the soldiers you abandoned? Weren't we your sons too?" And as this causes a visceral reaction in Uncle, he falls to the ground, bowing on his hands and knees, apologizing to Kung and telling him that he begs for his forgiveness for everyone that was lost and everything that Kung has been through, saying he's willing to do anything to make up for it. So Kung says, "There is one thing you can do. Die." There, as Iroh, still kneeled over, opens his eyes and is staring at the ground, realizing what's about to happen here, he begins to stand up as we see the room is suddenly filled with warriors ready to take Iroh out. As Iroh says that he refuses to die because he says that despite the misery it caused Kung, what Iroh did was still right, because endlessly taking lives for the glory of your nation is wrong, and saying that even though he's old, his life is still worth living, so he's not going to give it up to atone for his past mistakes. But this doesn't impress Kung at all. He says, "Yeah, okay," telling his men to seize Iroh no matter what it takes, as June finally steps in trying to speak on Iroh's behalf, telling her supplier that he doesn't actually need to kill Iroh to get his point across, as Kung hands June her payment, telling her to leave now because he actually plans on making Iroh suffer for a while before they put him out of his misery, so he can feel a fraction of what Kung and his men felt after they were abandoned. And remembering again that this is just a job for her, June actually takes the money and walks out, leaving Uncle Iroh to his fate, as he looks on disappointed, thinking that she was better than this, and stands there surrounded by men with swords ready to put him in cuffs, as Uncle Iroh has officially been captured by his biggest op. And now he's all alone. From there, she goes back to her pet Nyla as she gets ready to leave town and makes her way through the forest until eventually she ends up at Fan's farm that she found out about earlier, as Fan gets happy and says it's time for the tour. There, Fan shows June the llama paca herd that they tend to, as Fan takes June through the wheat fields and tells her that the best part of running a farm is just the sense of freedom they get, because anything they raise here is theirs to sell or eat or live alongside, and they're doing it with friends instead of a bunch of random people, with June saying that this actually does seem like a nice life. So as these two sit down to enjoy some tea and catch up, Fan asks June where her older buddy is, as June tells her that his name is Iroh and she's not allowed to answer that question, as Fan says that he seemed like a nice guy, and June says that he actually wasn't. He's done horrible things in his past. That's where Fan chuckles a bit, telling June that she's taken bounties for all sorts of bad people who didn't care about hurting innocent people, as June says people used to say that Fan is so heartless that she'd turn her own mother in for a bounty, and Fan laughs. But here she tells June that she believes that it's possible for people to change and make amends for what they've done earlier in their lives, but someone has to actually want to change or it's pointless. Fan says taking the first step towards this new life she has was one of the hardest things she's ever done, and this really stirs up some emotions in June as she realizes that it's her turn to do the same thing and reaches into her bag, throwing the coin purse up to Fan as the coins fall out, and she says, "So, do you think this is enough to hire you and your team for one last job?" As June tells Fan that she wants to hire them to break an old man out of the Wu Yi cartel's prisons, and Fan tells her she'll give her the friend of the crew discount because it actually isn't enough, as everyone gets together to start planning. There in the barn, Fan unfolds a map of the entire city as she says that Wu Yi is powerful, but they aren't untouchable, and they've had their own share of incidents that made them enemies over the last few years. So with this job, they're aiming for more than just freeing Iroh. Fan wants to completely remove Wu Yi's influence over the people of Daxia, who deserve better than the life that Kung is trying to force on them here, especially because tea is one of the most precious things in the world, and its trade shouldn't be run by a bunch of criminals. So as June and her friends all raise their arms to chants of "Free the tea!" we go forward a little in time, as the next day the operation is on. There we see this group climbing the outer walls around the Wu Yi headquarters as they send a llama packet in through the front, which allows it to take out both of the main guards, as Fan runs in screaming, "Unless you're being paid enough to fight for your lives, I suggest you leave," as people start running out of the courtyard saying they don't make nearly enough hourly to put up with this, and Fan smiles to one of the guards, saying that's what you get for being so cheap, as a new battle begins. We see her friends fighting purely with tools that you can find on a farm, completely outclassing all of the Wu Yi's group security as they easily disarm them by destroying their weapons, until Fan tells June to stop worrying about all of this fighting because she has a job to do. Understanding this perfectly, June runs off to the side and kicks a door in as she walks down the stairs into the holding cells area, and when she calls out for Iroh, he responds, being shocked that she actually came back, as we see that Iroh actually has a black eye as he's already been roughed up a little, and Iroh tells June that Kung promised him to make the next few days as painful for him as possible, so he's really glad she got here in time. This causes June to tell him that she actually paid good money to get him out, as they smile and she tells him to point out where she can find the keys. However, right there, unfortunately, she is met by the arrival of Kung, who says, "Looking for this?" But June isn't worried at all. She says, "Hand it over and I won't drop you like a hot cup of tea," as Kung tells June he's surprised that she would turn on her client, saying that she's going to ruin her reputation. But June doesn't care. She says she's reaching the end of her life as a bounty hunter, but isn't planning on reaching the end of her life anytime soon, as Kung tries to sneak attack her in the middle of the conversation, but June is too good. She easily dodges and pulls out some fabric from her bag, making Kung laugh because he's like, "A scarf? What are you gonna do with a scarf?" This is where, shockingly, June dodges another one of Kung's attacks and actually uses the scarf to wrap up his arms, grounds as she does some cool movements to get behind him and basically completely restrain him as she knocks him down onto his stomach and takes the key. But what's going on here? Well, June explains that the scarf is actually made of prize-winning llama paca wool, which is extremely strong and resistant to flames, buying her enough time to get Iroh out of his cage as she tells him that they need to hurry because that's not going to keep Kung restrained forever. And it seems like things are pretty much wrapped up here. June and Iroh walk outside and the fighting is basically over as Fan smiles at how easy things went, telling June that she can hire her and her friends anytime. As our bounty hunter thanks Fan for all of the hard work on this job, but that's when Kung finally makes it outside. He screams, "June! You've turned your back on your people. I'm what's left of the world you used to be part of. Now you're standing alongside a Fire Nation general who would see the end of everything that you love about this world. That makes it fun. He wants to make it all civilized, don't you see?" And there, June tells Kung that he's not one of her people and that ultimately he's wrong because the world has changed and it keeps on changing, and maybe that isn't a bad thing. Maybe there's room for a former Fire Nation general to become a tea shop owner or a bounty hunter to have a happy life on a farm with people that they call family. So as June tells Kung that she won't let him kill Iroh, she gives him a choice, telling him that he can either walk away with his life or deal with the consequences, as Kung says that he'll never walk away, as June smiles saying, "Okay, sure. Consequences it is, big guy," as Fan tosses her guarding scythe and June faces off against Kung alone with the former Fire Nation soldier using the infamous flaming dagger ability to try and take her out. But June is able to swiftly block Kung's attack as she dodges under his arm when he fires a second one, telling her just to let go and let him win since she's not even a bender. However, June tells him that he must be some kind of idiot because sure, maybe being a bender might make you more powerful than some non-benders, but that doesn't apply to her because she's different. She understands that sometimes a non-bender has to call upon one of their bending friends to get the job done, as she runs to hide behind Iroh, who's been managing his breath this entire time for a massive attack, with Kung realizing that he's cooked here as he screams "No!" But it's too late, as Iroh breathes fire so large that it nearly matches the entire building of the headquarters in size, knocking Kung back into a wall, defeated. As Iroh thanks June for letting him step in there because he says he really needed that, but now what? Things are still a mess. And with Kung defeated, this will only create a vacuum of power in Daxia Harbor with no one to lead it. So there, looking around, Iroh realizes that this big mess actually offers a good opportunity because he did come here to settle the issues that he's been having with his tea supply, and despite the fact that Wu Yi has been a criminal organization up until this point, they do have the complete infrastructure set up for their business, from various connects to shipping and trade routes. Someone needs to be in charge of all that. However, June isn't interested, but Iroh tells her that he actually wasn't considering her and goes over to Fan, telling her running Wu Yi is actually more of a job for Fan and her group of farmers because they know everything that it takes, as she says she was eventually planning on sizing up her business but didn't expect for it to happen like this, but ultimately agrees with Iroh's plan. Now from there, Iroh turns to June, telling her that she could get a big bounty for turning in a troublemaker like Kung. However, June actually tells him that she's ready to take her first steps into a new kind of life, even though she doesn't know what that'll be, as Iroh decides that he'll just take that money and reinvest it into his business, with Iroh smiling and saying that he's going to need to hire some help, and June does not look amused. Going forward 6 months though, we arrive at Iroh's tea shop with customers coming in and him advertising all new types of tea like Pearl Oolong from the further shores of the Fire Nation, or a new blend harvested from a new area called the Swamp, as suddenly Iroh is met with the arrival of June, who tells him that business looks like it's going great, as Iroh welcomes her to sit and relax, with her showing all the different tea samples she found all over the world on her travels as his new tea discoverer, saying that she's seen more of the world in the past 6 months than she ever did bounty hunting, as Iroh offers for her to sit and enjoy this tea on the house that she worked so hard getting despite how expensive it is. And while Iroh sips tea with his new friend, this story comes to an end.